Welcome back to another episode of the It Starts With You podcast. I am so excited and grateful for our guest today, Scott Tillema. Scott, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey Julie, how you doing today? Great to be with you.
Oh my goodness, we are in for such a good conversation. So everybody listening, get out like a pen, a notebook, whatever it is, because I know that we're going to have so many things to dive into. So I want to give Scott a proper introduction because your story and your experience is really phenomenal. So Scott Tillema is an internationally recognized crisis negotiator and professional keynote speaker. He is known and respected for his experience negotiating in emotionally charged situations with high stakes and when the situation requires sensitivity to the human element. As a partner at the Negotiations Collective, an international negotiations training firm, he provides training and coaching to clients from across the world. Scott has over 20 years of law enforcement experience in the Chicago area and is an FBI-trained hostage negotiator. He has spent many years negotiating with one of the largest regional SWAT teams in the United States. Scott is a leader in the field of negotiation, conflict resolution, and influence. Educationally, Scott holds a master's degree in psychology, a bachelor's degree in behavioral science, and has received negotiation training at Harvard University's program on negotiation at IMD Business School. Okay, that introduction and your bio, Scott, you have such a story and so much experience, but what I love to start with is, in your own words, who's Scott?
I am in a huge identity shift right now, so I'm still exploring this right now. I just this year have finished a 20-year career in law enforcement and now am moving into professional speaking and running my business where we're doing corporate training classes. So I'm still trying to find this out, and that's such an easy question to answer, but such a difficult one for me at this moment in time. But to give my best answer, I'm a husband, a father of three amazing kids. I'm a drummer. I'm a Wisconsin guy. I love everything about Wisconsin, and everybody
Woohoo!
in my current home state of Illinois knows it. My passion professionally is negotiation, and now that I am out of the law enforcement world, really my mission, my purpose is to inspire people of all backgrounds to be powerful negotiators.
Ooh, I love that. And yes, go Wisconsin. We connected we connected on that as a fellow Wisconsinite here. So I love how you actually identified that shift right then of like sometimes when people say like who are you and what do you do, we think that that's such an easy question, but when you're in this state of transition it can be one of the most challenging. What took you from law enforcement to now wanting to go out and speak and train on the thing that you had been doing for so long?
Right. I wanted to continue to make an impact, and I love leadership. I love studying leadership and figuring out how we can influence others. And I enjoyed working in law enforcement for 20 years. I worked for a police department outside Chicago, worked for this regional SWAT team doing high pressure negotiations, and I thought it was very cool. And in my last couple of years, I wasn't doing the work, but I was a training coordinator teaching the next generation of people how to do the work. And I just thought it was terrific to see that impact that we can make on others. And I just started considering how can I have a broader impact and share my message. And a few years earlier, I was invited to give a TED Talk, which has been seen a few times, and people would invite me to speak on their stages and share my knowledge, my experience, and my background in negotiations. And I thought that this was a really fun thing to do, and then learned that, hey, this can be a career thing to do. So with a woman up in Calgary, Joanna Shea, we started the company, the Negotiations Collective, and now we're out there sharing about negotiations, conflict resolution, and how people can make their difficult conversations a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And you have such a unique experience. So having worked in corporate and working with organizations now, that was actually a really big topic that a lot of people would want training on and would struggle with is when it comes to like contract negotiations, when it comes to trying to influence people on your team or influence business partners. And a lot of the times, I might get like razzed on this, but a lot of the times it was such corporate-esque speak in terms of, you know, this strategy or this model, but I often saw people miss like the human connection piece of it or the actual, how do I put this into tangible things. So when you were talking to groups about this, what is one of the core things that you want them to get away when they have a training with you when it comes to negotiating an influence?
Yeah, for sure. Everybody wants to know, hey, how do I influence somebody else? How do I control that other person and get them to do what I want them to do? And, obviously it's not that easy. People can't just be controlled. So I always start with a discussion of managing myself first and challenging people, are you effectively managing yourself? And what is your person effect? How are others experiencing you? And sometimes there's a real disconnect in between what I want to present as to who I am and what I'm sharing, and then how that's received by somebody else. And there are such minor pieces of communication that can make such significant shifts in how we are received that I think is really important to begin by managing ourselves and understanding, okay, what are my triggers? What can be done? What can be said that's going to throw me off base a little bit? Because the reality is, whether we're doing negotiations or just having difficult conversations or engaging in some level of conflict management or resolution, it's an emotional thing. And emotions are involved all the time. And for anybody that says it's facts and figures and data and charts, they're wrong. We're emotional people, and that's been shown by all the top universities and their research on how important emotions are on the decisions that we make. I mean, behavioral economics is a whole field of study dedicated to how we make decisions, and it's been shown over and over that emotions are an important part of that. So, do we have a full understanding of ourselves and how emotions impact us, and how we can use these same drivers of human behavior to start to shift the behavior of others?
Ooh, oh, okay. Everyone pause, rewind, listen to that again, because that is such an amazing explanation. And I talk about this a lot on the podcast. As a high performance coach, I'm certified in energy leadership. We start with you, right? That's literally why the name of the podcast is It Starts With You, because everything is that ripple effect. It starts with you having this level of self-awareness that a lot of people don't have. They're not consciously aware of their emotions and how they're showing up. So when it comes to that first really crucial step of managing yourself, what is something that like a tip that you would give to somebody if they're like, okay, great, if I want to influence other people, I need to manage myself. What does that look like in practice?
Well, I would say that if you're finding out something that triggers you while you're having the conversation, you haven't prepared nearly enough. That we need to, your preparation for these conversations or negotiation begins a long, long time ago. And I remember it was 2007 that I was being trained by the FBI on how to be a hostage and crisis negotiator. And I remember, hey, this is going to be cool. They're going to teach me, the magic phrase to say and to make people do whatever we want them to do. And of course, I was wildly disappointed when they started making us do listening exercises. And we had to practice listening. And they taught us the 8 skills of active listening. And it had to be more than just something I knew. It was something that I could do. And then it had to become who we are. So having the practice and being able to do these exercises every day and just move from something I know to something I can do to who I am. And then you have the confidence to engage in these conversations and to ask the difficult questions and to be able to sit with people when that emotion is there. And so often people are trying to get away from that emotion. My thought is embrace that emotion and get comfortable with that. And the only way you can do that is by continuing to practice when maybe the stakes aren't nearly as high. And if something does creep up on you and we're surprised by this, we have to move into what we call tactical breathing or box breathing, where we're starting to regulate our instinctive responses or our urge to respond instinctively and move to that more sophisticated part of the brain where we're responding in a way that's much more thoughtful. And that could be by breathing in for the count of 4, holding it for the count of 4, breathing out for the count of 4, holding it for the count of 4. And this is what they teach fighter pilots and people who work under high stress, just to regain that thinking piece. Or if nothing else, have this word that you can say to yourself that, okay, I know I'm feeling that trigger where there's almost a physical response coming out in me. My heart's beating, I'm sweating, I'm shaking a little bit. That one word that I can say, and I'm going to say nothing else until I count to 3. And whatever that word could be, it could be difficult, it could be it's a game, challenging. And I'm just going to say it to myself, count to three to make sure I'm not going to do or say anything that's instinctive that I might later regret or something that might hurt my position.
Oh, there's so many tips in that. So a couple tips I just heard from you is the box breathing, which I love. I actually do box breathing as well and try different breathing techniques. Having the word that you say, and a big one I heard you say is around just pausing, right? 'Cause so many people, and you said you're just like reactive, and they have this emotional charge. And if we're talking about like the nervous system, right, where the breathing is calming down our nervous system, when we're in those situations, a lot of people don't have the tools to handle that. And so starting to use these tools. And another thing that we talk about is this is like, I always compare this like physical fitness, like this is like a muscle that we are flexing, and we're trying to build those muscles so that when it's like quote unquote battle time and you're in the moment, you're ready for it. And so I love that you highlight that as well, as if you're in the moment, that's too late. You need to have been practicing leading up to this.
That's it. That's it. And your success is going to depend on how prepared you are. In any negotiation training anywhere, it talks about your preparation. And I was almost heartbroken when I was learning this because we get very good at tactics at the table. Having these listening skills, having the skills of delivering that message, and then to learn, okay, well, that has such a small impact on your outcomes. And like, really? And you're learning that, your power in conflict and your power in negotiation comes from information and options. And the more information we take in, the more options we create, the more powerful we're going to be. So it's great that you can manage yourself, but now let's take it deeper and start to be creative and discover these different ways that we could maybe resolve a difficult situation.
And I can think of so many instances with clients I've worked with where they have a situation where they know that they were not regulated. They know that they didn't handle it well. And then you leave with some of that regret or with some of that, oops, I messed up in that situation. Have you had a situation in your experiences where even with all of your training and all of the things that where you're like, okay, I did not handle that well. And what did you do?
Yeah, for sure. And it still happens. And if you don't have kids, go out and have kids or borrow some kids.
Yeah, right.
And this is going to be your ultimate exercise in
So
how
true.
well you manage yourself, right? Uh, because we're impatient sometimes. We're tired sometimes. We're hungry sometimes. So I know what I need to do to get myself in that better state. And sometimes it's just going and having a couple tacos and saying, all right, I'm back, I'm better. So just understanding I know where I need to be at my peak performance. And the thing is, we're not always there. And I've certainly had examples of failure in even our big negotiations, and it's going to happen. And a lot of times we have to realize that sometimes the outcome is beyond our control. And that comes to giving ourselves a little bit of grace there, that we don't have to carry it all on our shoulders all the time. And this isn't an out to say that we're not responsible because we always need to learn. We always need to understand what went well and what went wrong. And so often we're quick to look at, okay, well, this went wrong, but let's also examine what went right. When we win the outcome that we're looking for, did we have a proper process and structure, or did we just get lucky? So I think that we always need to be examining ourselves and figure out, okay, here's what happened and here's why it happened and here's how we can do better next time, even though it might have gone well. I still want to know we can do better next time because maybe it's a more challenging situation. But yeah, for sure, there are times that we don't do well. And for anybody that tells you they have 100% success rate in anything, they're either lying to you or they're not trying nearly hard enough.
Oh, I love that you use that example with kids too. So I have a 6-year-old, and you have those days where you're like, okay, I know what to do. I know, I understand the science behind all of this. And then you get in that moment, and I swear that kids can be the best negotiators too, because they just like break you down until you're like, okay, okay.
Right, right. And that's tough. And that's also something that we can learn, that the persistence, that the continuing on, and sometimes we're worried that we're going to fail as adults, so we don't ask. We don't continue. And how much more could we get in life if we just simply asked? But what holds people back from asking for more? Their fear of being told no. And I would love to propose to your listeners that you want to be told no. And I think it's the mindset of, well, I want to get to the yes. I want you to hear no. Because if you're not hearing no, you're not asking for enough, you're not asking for enough price, you're not asking for more. I want to hear no. And if we're hearing yes all the time, I think we're failing. And I
Hmm.
almost get upset. Now, as a professional speaker, I apply to speak at conferences quite a bit. I want to get in front of broad audiences. And I know that I'm not doing well if I haven't been told no recently enough. Like if it's been a number of days or a week or two that I haven't heard the word no, okay, I'm not trying hard enough. So embrace no, expect no, and then begin your strategy from when we hear that word. That's when this discussion is going to begin. No is the beginning, no is not the end.
Oh, mic drop. Boom. Mic drop moment. And I think that I jotted down some of the things you said of, just simply ask. And I see that a lot with people, whether they're trying to negotiate a contract, negotiate salary, negotiate for a project, a position, influence on any of those things, and they shy away because of that fear for what's going to happen if they say no. And then the alternative to that, well, what's going to happen if you don't ever ask? Right? You're never going to get it if you don't ask. And so when you think of what are some of the situations that when you're getting out there and you're speaking to audiences and you're getting on these stages, some of the things you're hearing that, is there a certain situation that people struggle with the most when it comes to this negotiation and influence?
Yeah, for sure. That people almost universally, people feel very good when I get to negotiate for you. If I'm representing Julie on this deal, I'm going to go out and really give it my best. But if I'm representing myself on something, I don't feel powerful and I feel uncomfortable. So what I try to instill in people is let's do a little mindset shift right now that I'm afraid to negotiate for myself. I'm afraid to ask for more. I'm afraid to come in and make these demands or these proposals. And sometimes a really good outcome is no, this doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for you. And that's okay. But you won't know that if you don't explore that. And the mindset shift goes like this. I don't negotiate for me, I negotiate for we. Because for every listener right now, when they use the word we, I want to ask you, who are you talking about? When you use the word we, who are you talking about? And for me, it's my family and maybe my two dogs and my two cats. And this is me and it's we. So when I say I want a higher price for a speaking fee, or it's going to cost you more to run these training classes, I'm not negotiating for me, I'm negotiating for we. Because if I get a increase on this, who's going to benefit? It's going to be my family, my wife. That means that we could maybe take a vacation or we can get that check engine light fixed on the car or whatever needs to be done. It's not just me that's benefiting, it's everybody behind me. It's my business partner, my vice president of business development. It's everybody that we're working with that's going to benefit. So if we get out of the mindset that, well, I don't want to ask because it's rude, that's a social norm. We are now implementing business norms here. I don't negotiate for me, I negotiate for we. And with that simple little switch, all of a sudden people will realize that's right. Because if I take a little bit less, or I don't get the vacation, or I don't get the bonus or the raise, who is impacted? And it's not just me, it's everybody else that I serve.
Ooh, that is such a good shift. I love that mindset shift because oftentimes what people say is either they feel selfish or they feel, quote unquote, they feel bad. Well, I feel bad if I ask for more. I feel bad if I ask them to change this. And when we think of it from the perspective of what's the alternative and what's the worst that could happen, you ask, what's the worst that could happen?
Right? They're going to say no. And in fact, it's been shown that in negotiations, that if, say, my speaking fee for this is 10,000 and you don't have 10,000 to give me, and so you negotiate down a little bit and say, hey, we're going to give you 9,500. You're going to make me, we're going to get in this negotiation, we're going to go back and forth, and you're going to make me work a little bit harder for this outcome. um, you're people are going to feel like they've won when they've invested a little bit more. And even though I might not get as much, I'm going to feel better if I had to work hard for that 9,500 than if I said my speaking fee is 10,000. You said yes, deal. I'm going to have that moment of, oh, oh, I probably could have gotten twice that much
Yep.
because she required, it's called the winner's remorse, that now I'm feeling bad about the 10,000 when I could feel really good about the 9,500. And psychologically, it makes no sense that I'm getting less and I feel better about it. But it's this cognitive bias, the IKEA effect, which shows when we work really hard for something, we put great value in it. And it
Mhm.
seems a little bit silly, but that's why I encourage everybody to negotiate a little bit. You might actually feel better about your outcome. And it's possible that you can create in that discussion more than just a financial deal. Maybe there's introductions involved, or photo or video. All kinds of great creative things can happen when we begin with a dialogue.
That's so true. You know, when somebody says like yes right away, you have that moment where you go, oh, they probably had even more of a budget, or they probably could have given me more, and maybe I should have asked for more. I had a business coach of my own once that said like if you are hearing yes every time you pitch, and all of the people are saying yes to you, then it sounds like you're not charging enough, right? So that idea, and I think also what came up for me while you were talking was this idea of respect. The word popped up while you were talking about this, like building respect for each other and the relationship that you're developing together when you're negotiating.
Yeah, I think that's the fundamental, that's a foundational piece. Respect is foundational in any interaction. And respect alone is not going to get you the outcome that you're looking for, particularly in more complex negotiations. It takes more than that. But without this piece, you will never form the connection that you need. You will never form the bond. You will never get through the conflict because ultimately you are my negotiation partner.
Mm-hmm.
We are working together to resolve whatever it is we're trying to resolve. We're not opponents. We're not fighting each other. So it takes both of us to get to an agreement because ultimately a negotiation is not me being right. It's not about me getting everything I want. It's not me getting you to believe what I believe. It's reaching an acceptable outcome. That's all it is. And
Mm-hmm.
that takes both of us working together to say, yes, I will agree to this. And it's really, really hard to reach an agreement with somebody else when you have that friction, when you don't feel there's respect, when there isn't that connection. So respect is foundational, and it's so much more than just being respectful, the yes, please, and no, thank you. It's really driving into these, drivers of emotion and what motivates people to do the things we do. But yeah, I love that you mentioned that because respect, I can't think of an example where that's helpful to getting to an outcome that we're looking for when you have interpersonal conflict or people are trying to work toward a resolution.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting too. I jotted down while we were talking about this idea of this win-win. I think a lot of the people go into a situation, right? You know, insert situation where you're trying to negotiate or influence someone, any situation with this, I want to win, versus this lens of how can we sort of co-create this win-win. And that sometimes takes setting your ego aside to be able to create that type of relationship. And when we can go in with that win-win lens versus how do I win, then I think the energy that you're coming into the whole situation changes the result that you'll get.
Yeah, for sure. And make no mistake, I go into a negotiation to win because I come from a background where I have to. Like
Mm,
there isn't a situation where it's okay if we don't. But we always have to be mindful that this has to be somehow acceptable to the other person. So certainly they can't come away feeling like a loser. They can't walk away feeling embarrassed. Because the reality is, you are probably representing somebody else. So now you have to agree to this, and this negotiation is over. But now you need to turn and have a discussion with your people and explain to them why, as their negotiator, as their leader, you've agreed to this thing.
mm-hmm,
And how do you explain this to your stakeholders and people in your tribe to say this is an agreement that we need to support? So
mm-hmm.
there's a lot of complexities and a lot of negotiations that need to be had beyond just this conversation that you and I might be having.
So when you talked about, one of the things too that I'd love to just dive into quick is, the first stage is you need to be able to manage yourself. You need to have this awareness. In your speaking and in the trainings that you do you also talk on how do you have more emotional intelligence and awareness of other people's body language and voice? And is there any tips that you'd give for somebody who's trying to kind of develop that muscle?
Oh my goodness, that could be a 3-day class. That question right there. Great question, Julie. So we make decisions based on how we feel. And that's it. How I feel. Do I like you? Am I comfortable? Do I trust you? And so much of that is beyond the spoken word. And in my classes, I'll do exercises with people where we demonstrate it's not what you say, it's how you say it. We'll go through the same story a couple different times, and you just change a little emphasis, and you are going to hear an entirely different presentation. And I think that's what we're seeing in society today, that, well, here's the same set of facts, but it's presented and framed this way and this way on these two different news channels. And people are interpreting it through their lens. And by the time it reaches the end user, it's almost like we're not even discussing the same event. So how we frame it with our words is important. How we say those words with the inflections is important. And then the nonverbals are massive. That we can change everything by the body language, posture, facial expressions, gestures. This is so powerful in what we do. And giving a little smile from time to time, just letting somebody know, hey, I'm okay with this, even in the intense discussions, say, hey, I'm still with you. And we're making decisions about that all the time. I would study TED Talks on mute. I'll just turn off and I'll watch people give talks and presentations with no sound at all, just to see what kind of feeling are they creating from the stage, from the platform they're on. And that all comes from the nonverbals, how they're positioning, how they're posturing. And it's really kind of a cool exercise to do. So certainly we're going to prepare what we're going to say, but how many of your listeners right now have ever prepared their delivery or how they're going to say it, or gotten coaching and feedback on their nonverbals and how people experience them? And if you're like everybody else, the answer is probably very little or never or none. And that's okay, but something to bring awareness to. So I love the question of beyond the content, the delivery of how we're expressing that message, and then the nonverbals. What do people see in that engagement?
Oh, and those words, that presence and energy is just a word that comes up because it's this thing that you cannot necessarily put your finger on. Like, oh, that person has it.
Right.
And it's this energy that they have. And I mean, executive presence, speaking, communication, those are some of the top things that I'm usually helping people with. And that's one of the most difficult things is like, okay, we can talk about the delivery and we can work on the practice and we can do all of that, but it's your body language and how you carry yourself. It's not even the physical, it's the emotion and the energy that's coming through. Like you said, the only way to develop that is to be aware of what it is and to practice it and to look to other people that you think have it. And be able to identify, what pieces of that do I want to bring through?
Right. And let me ask you, in your experience, when you have somebody up there and you can see the nervousness and you can see the anxiety, and we see this in leaders where technically they're very good, so they get promoted up because they're good at what they do, but no one has given them the tools to be a powerful communicator. Your ability to lead is directly tied to your ability to communicate, period. Because you go up there, you could have all these great ideas, but if I'm seeing somebody who's got the shakes and very uncomfortable and can't wait to not be the one sharing, I'm not following you. You are not instilling in me the confidence. So what do you see there? Is that your experience? And how do you help those folks?
Oh, I love it. Scott's turning the tables here. Yeah, it is one of the things that I always tell people is, when we're working on those things, it's always an internal and an external skill balance, because externally people are like, okay, I want to be, or, companies will come and say, hey, I want you to work with this leader and I want them to have better presence. And, they stumble on their words and all of this. And there's the external things. Like, yes, we can work on that. But the most difficult part is the internal part, because usually there's something going on, that imposter syndrome, that confidence, the beliefs, the stories they're telling themselves, that's actually coming through when they're in front of a group. And so when we're working on those things, we actually start there. And I say it's like digging down until we get to the real root of what's going on. An example I use for people is like if you have an apple tree and you want to turn it into an orange tree, can you just pick the fruit on the outside? No, you have to get to the roots. And so I always say we have to get to the roots and kind of the uncomfortable stuff first to understand what's getting in the way of you feeling confident in front of that room. I feel like I don't belong. I feel like people aren't listening, right? And once you start to identify those things and you start to kind of peel those layers away and kind of rewrite those beliefs, then the external things can come. Then we can really work on that presence and that stage presence and that confidence. And so it's never an easy answer, but it's the work that needs to happen about you and your belief and your abilities that's really coming through when you get in front of a room.
And it takes a moment of vulnerability, right? To say, I don't feel comfortable here, or I need work on this. And I will assure you, for any leaders who are listening right now, if you have that, you are not alone. I work with leaders a couple times a year in Switzerland through IMD Business School's Advanced High Performance Leadership Program. It's a great executive education program. If anybody out there is looking for a great leadership program, check out Dr. George Kohlreiser and High Performance Leadership. Amazing class. But we work with leaders to have difficult conversations. And it's more than a keynote. It's more than training. We are sitting down one-on-one, and I am role-playing with them to have these difficult conversations. And to add a little pressure in just for fun, we'll have all their peers sit in a circle around, and everybody's watching. And you want to dial up some pressure. Nobody wants to fail in front of their peers, right? And it's practicing and allowing them to explore themselves and really pushing the boundaries of what am I comfortable with. And the growth that we see for people who decide I am going to have a seat in that seat of courage and really work on this, it is amazing, to the point that we've got tears and hugs, because this is where the explosive growth happens. When we're getting you off the couch, you're not watching the PowerPoint anymore and taking notes, you're doing the work. So really challenge yourself to take a step and get out there and say, here's what I'm good at, here's what I'm afraid of. And the results are going to be amazing.
Oh, I have goosebumps when you said it, because that vulnerability piece really stood out. I mean, I'll get on the first couple sessions usually when I'm working, especially with an executive, on presence or communication, and all of a sudden we're like kind of getting deep and they're getting vulnerable and they might have emotion coming up and then they're feeling uncomfortable because they're like, I thought we were just coaching me on how to present better. It's like there's so much more there, and when you can kind of open that up and take that wall down, there's so much more power and potential. And so that sounds like, I'm so glad that you shared that. Definitely look into that, that program and that ability to do it in a really different way that people are not used to, right? When we talk about like leadership development, instead of just sitting in a room and learning a framework, it's you're interacting, you're getting involved, and you have that more of that awareness.
For sure. And I went through that program in 2019 as a participant. I don't think I've ever shared this on a podcast or video. So here's a big reveal for anybody
Ooh.
who follows me. I believe I was one of 2 Americans, and I think there were 60 people in the high performance leadership class. And I was one of 2 Americans, and I'm American police officer. So there may be some stereotypes that go with this, and maybe some identity pieces that go with this. And this is a 6-day class. I think it starts on Sunday, goes till Friday. And if you had told me, all right, Scott, here's the deal. By the middle of the week, you are going to just be openly crying in front of the whole group and everybody's going to see it. I will tell you, I will bet you my house, my retirement, and everything I have that there is no way that is going to happen. 0 chance. You know why? Because I'm an American, I'm a male, I'm a police, all the stereotypes that I have to represent and the identity of who I am. And here I am watching George, the program director, do his thing, working with people, and it is stunning to see how we have the ability to change and grow and develop, and being in touch with our emotion and being willing to say, I am an emotional person. And this does drive me. And I mean, the takeaway is that we can invest in ourselves, but until we choose, I am going to make this change. I am going to be willing to give myself to my leader, my coach, the director, whoever it is, to say, make me better. which is the work that you do. And that's why I think you've got a great following, because people follow you and say, I want to be better. I just listened to the unboxing episode that you just had. Just listen to LinkedIn Lindsay because I want to be better. And you are bringing that to people. So a quick kudos to you and your work in your podcast and the impact that you're making, because I know that there are people out there like me who are listening in saying, I want to truly do what you're challenging me to do. And because of it, I'm a better person.
And being able to put that vulnerability and that openness and that willingness and always be a learner, right? Like I do the same. I put myself in rooms with people who are much further along. I put myself in rooms where I'm kind of going back to foundational things, because there's this idea of always being able to improve and these skills. So on that lens, actually, there's one or two more things I want to talk about before we wrap up. Is knowing that, who do you think benefits from getting, negotiation, influence, training, and support?
I think that all of us. Now, it's my sincere hope that none of your listeners are ever going to be engaging in a hostage or crisis negotiation. Like if they are, something's gone terribly wrong and we got to fix that. But all of us are having difficult conversations. Who out there is not having difficult conversations? And if you're not, you probably should be, right? So anyone out there who is in a people profession, if you are in a leadership role of any kind, if you want to be in a leadership role of any kind, I can help make your life easier by giving you the structure, the techniques to have these difficult conversations, because we avoid these things, or we're bad at them, or we rush them. So to answer your question, anybody who is working with people, anybody who could want to work with people or wants to have influence in their life, they need to learn the ability to negotiate, because negotiation is communication. It's getting what you want. And I don't know of anybody out there who's going to raise their hand and be like, I don't want to be more powerful. I don't want to be more influential. I'm pretty good just where I'm at. That you don't hear that a lot. So leaders, it's time to learn how to be powerful negotiators, how to get what you want, how to be influential. Because the question I have for you is this: are people following you because of your position on the organizational chart? Or are they following you because you have the ability to truly lead and inspire those who are behind you to say, I will go with you through the wall. I am with you.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So, and I know those of you who are listening who either are, working as leaders or working for other leaders, you can think of those people that you follow them because of who they are, the energy they bring, how they make you feel. And then you have those people that you feel that force to follow. You feel like, oh my goodness, if they weren't here, that would be totally fine. And I want you to think about, like, what type of leader are you growing into? How are you developing? Okay, Scott, I feel like we could talk forever. We might have to have like a part 2, because I know that I'm going to get so many comments and feedback about how amazing this session is and all of the amazing things that you had to share. One of the last questions that I like to ask all of my guests is, the name of the podcast is It Starts With You. I have a lot of reasons why I named the podcast that, but I love to get your perspective on, in a sentence or a few short sentences, what does It Starts With You mean to you?
For me, that if my goal is to inspire people of all backgrounds to be powerful negotiators, that means everything I do has to funnel toward that purpose. I have to manage myself, my time, my knowledge, my skills. If I want to serve others, I have to be really good at what I do first. So it starts with me. I can't achieve my goal if I personally am a mess.
Yes, it starts with you. You've got to figure your stuff out first if you want to be able to help other people to do that. Scott, thank you so much for being on, for sharing your experiences, for sharing some of those tangible things that people can start putting into practice. And my challenge is for everybody listening or watching this YouTube video is to really sit with and think, where in my life, where in my work do I have an opportunity that I've been shying away from negotiating something, trying to influence somebody on something, and how could I take one of these things that Scott shared to actually put myself intentionally in that position to do it? That's my challenge for you. And then my challenge is to take it one step further, to post about it and to tag both Scott and myself in what it is that you're going to take on, or maybe privately, but make sure you share about the episode. So Scott, I know that people are going to want to follow you and connect with you after this. So share with us, how can people stay connected with you?
Yeah, first of all, I'm a real normal person. So my preferred platform is LinkedIn. So if you are on LinkedIn, send me a message and say hello. I'll be happy to chat back with you. You can find me at scotttillema.com, negotiationscollective.com, or if this episode was not nearly enough, Scott, for you and you need 18 more minutes, I invite you to check out my TED Talk. It's called The Secrets of Hostage Negotiators, where I share a couple stories about my work and how we get what we want.
Amazing. Yes, make sure you check that out. We will make sure that we link all of this in the show notes as well. And if this sounds like a topic that you want to bring to your next conference, your event, or if you want to have more of that intimate team training and workshop, make sure that you reach out to Scott and check out Sure to Be Amazing speaking and training that he has. So thank you so much, Scott, for being on. And until next time, remember, it starts with you.